Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential Podcast. I am Andrew Kahn.
I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
The Michigan basketball teams are ready for the stretch run of the Big Ten season. Where do they stand in the conference pecking order? Plus, the football program has made some news off the field, and we've got some hockey updates as well. We discuss that and more coming up on Wolverine Confidential. All right, guys, good to be with you here Monday afternoon, February 23rd. It has been a while since the three of us have talked on this podcast. A lot has gone on since we last did. Ryan, he spent an extra night in Washington, D.C. Aaron and his wife had a couple of children. I had a stroke. A lot has gone on in these last, few weeks for sure.
The important thing is that you're back, though. That's what's most exciting, and it's not the same without the 3-man pod. So it's good to have you back.
I think I said this to you, Andrew, at one point, but I don't think a day went by where either someone asked me about you or I got asked about you. So it was every day, it seemed like, whether it was on the beat or off the beat. So we're glad to have you back.
Yes, very, very happy to be back, just from a personal standpoint, and just for my work. I was antsy to get back. So happy to do it. Anything off the court, off the field that anybody would like to report on? Now's the time before we get into some of this Michigan sports stuff.
I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep right now, so I don't even know at this point. It's like, let's just talk about the sports and move on, I guess. But unless you guys have anything.
I know you're not complaining about sleep, man. Come on. Anyway, let's go.
At least you're in your own home, like not like an airport and running around. But fair enough.
I don't think I've slept more than 4 hours in the last week, so I'm running on fumes myself. But let's roll.
All right, let's get into some Michigan men's basketball. Ryan Zook, that is a reason you were in Washington D.C. an extra night. Since the two of you last spoke, the Michigan team won at Purdue, a very impressive victory, and they lost in Washington, D.C. to now number one Duke, 68-63. Ryan, you and I were both there. We both wrote how Michigan, they did trail the entire second half, but it was competitive, like to the final possession. So Duke just kept Michigan at arm's distance, and earned the win. I guess what stood out to you about Michigan's performance in that one?
I think the not having Mara on the court or only 22 minutes just really hurt them, because Cameron Boozer, not Carlos, like I accidentally called him in the post-game press conference. He just he's such a mismatch without Mara on the court. And when Mara was on the court, he was effective, 4-4 shooting, 10 points. But like, it's just, you could tell when he wasn't on there, Michigan's defense kind of struggled, and Duke started off just on fire, and then it kind of became a defensive slugfest a little bit and late in the first half and into the second half. But I think that Boozer was the difference maker, and Michigan's guards didn't really come to play, and they struggled shooting. Like, they just didn't make enough shots. And with that said, it was still, like you said, a close game, competitive game throughout in the second half.
Yeah, Dusty ended up playing, Adai Mara when he had the fouls, and then he picked up a third one, which was tricky, and then obviously a fourth. It was tough because they've had stretches without him where they've done well, but against Duke's size, it would be helpful to have him out there. But he was called for a lot of fouls, some questionable, I guess. So who knows how much of a difference it would have made. He had some blocks and some plays that were, didn't go Michigan's way, but it was not ideal to not have him out there for those stretches.
It really came up in like the rebounding, right? Michigan got dominated on the boards. It's not something they're used to doing. And while I was feeding the babies, I was watching the game in my slumber. But like, two things stood out to me: it was the rebounding, and then Michigan's guards really seemed bothered by Duke's size. I don't know if you guys felt the same thing, but Elliot Cadeau, really struggled at times. He took some questionable shots. You wonder how that's going to affect him come tournament time. But you could tell the guards really affected Michigan's offense and how they played.
Like both coaches said, though, too, like that was a perfect time for an NCAA tournament tune-up, because, the crowd was fantastic, about 50-50. Like, every time either team went on a little bit of a run or had a big play, like the arena erupted. So, and this could be a potential NCAA tournament rematch deep in the tournament potentially, and I think both teams could benefit from it too. Like it's yeah, Michigan's cruising along in Big Ten play, but then when you have to prepare for a non-conference opponent that you don't know as well, it changes things up. And I think yeah, Michigan should be better from it in the long run.
It was a sold out crowd. I wrote that it was like 50-50. Would you agree, Ryan? I mean, you were there. It seemed like it was pretty split, and I think it was the highest resale value for any, non-conference game this year. They said it was the most attended game of any non-conference game this year too.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it was very close to 50-50. And um yeah, I mean there was little pockets of each side. We were sitting in the section closest to like Michigan fans, so we definitely heard it more when they erupted. But like I mean, you could definitely tell when Duke made a play that there was still quite a few cheers.
But yeah, as Aaron said, Elliot Cadeau, not his best game. Trey McKinney, not his best game. Kaysen scored a few baskets, but like the other guards, Burnett, Gale, like no, there wasn't enough production from them, and that's unusual. This game, I asked Dusty about it today. I was like, "This is kind of weird," but you didn't play that well, and you were still right there at the end. Is that like kind of comforting in a way? Is it? Is there some optimism with that? And he actually said yes. Like obviously, Duke has a lot to say do with that. They played well, or they played well enough down the stretch. They didn't play their best either. But yeah, the fact that Michigan, I think when Michigan plays their best, they're the best team in the country. But in this game they didn't, and playing another really good team on the neutral floor, it cost them.
Right, and that's the concern come tournament time, right? If you have an off night, you don't play well, especially as you go deeper into tournaments, it could cost you. Fortunately for Michigan, we've talked about this ad nauseum, right? Their depth and the talent is there. So I do think it was a good tune-up. I do wonder, is this something Dusty wants to continue playing like a high level non-conference game this late in the year? Because this isn't a usual thing, as we talked about, right? Usually these games are reserved for November and December, the early tournament time. To play this type of game this late in the year with the NCAA tournament and the conference tournament looming, I thought it was an interesting decision. I think it's a great tune-up, as you guys were talking about, right? Like it's an opportunity to play some of the best, and obviously you didn't know how good Duke was going to be at the beginning of the year, but they're always really good. And then, but to come out on the losing side, there's a lot to learn here from, and there's a lot to be gained from, even if you don't come out victorious.
It's a great question. I think the answer is yes. I mean, he plans to play a game like this, next year and going forward. Late February non-conference game. It's interesting that it came right. Like they had just played Purdue. They're going to play Illinois soon. Like maybe not the best timing overall, but yeah, non-conference neutral floor game. Why not? And we, like you said, we could see this again. So yeah, it's a great matchup and good for college basketball. That's what he kept saying, and why he hopes to keep doing it. Plus, the neutral floor element adds some NIL opportunities. As Ryan and I discussed, we kept looking for replays. There's a lot of plays that could have used one, but instead up on the board was that advertisement at all times. So we didn't really see much of that.
I'll say this: for someone who kind of consumed the game on television, you guys were there live in the arena, but someone who watched game day, ESPN game day in the morning, and then tuned in like for the pregame coverage, it felt like a big game. And you had obviously game day was there in the arena. They had the shoot arounds there open to the public. It almost felt like an NCAA tournament game. So in that respect, I thought it was kind of cool. It felt like a big game, felt like a big game atmosphere, and it certainly lived up to it in the way it was played out.
Yeah, I mean, people were lined up outside the doors well before tip off, before they opened the gates to the public. So, yeah, I mean, just walking around DC too before the game, like, yeah, there was a lot of buzz about this game, and like even on social media, like people calling this like almost like a mini Super Bowl, which is a little bit too much hyperbole, but yeah, no, it was. I think this is great for just fans like to be able to get up for this type of game that in this late in the season. I think I mean, because when the non-conference games early in the year, so yeah, these teams will probably be good, but sometimes they like flame out once they actually get into their own conference play, and it's like, oh, I guess that game didn't mean as much. I mean, we're deep in the season now. We know Duke and Michigan are really, really good, so they kind of just added to the buildup, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, this game, do you think it meant that much at the end of the day? You wanted to win, but the fact that you didn't, now Duke is in position for the number one seed because they have that head-to-head win over Michigan now. And if Michigan had won, if you're the number one overall seed, you do get to pick where you're sent for your first two rounds. So Michigan can no longer do that, and they'll just get sent to where they are geographically closest to. Now, there's not any Midwest location for those first 2 rounds, so you're either going, I guess, Buffalo or Philadelphia, regardless. Um, so yeah, that's really the only change. After that, I still feel like they're in position to go through Chicago in the regional, and then the Final Four is in Indianapolis. So I don't think there's a huge difference whether they came out on top of this one.
No, yeah, I 100% agree too. I mean, the number one overall seed is kind of overrated. You just want to be a top seed. I feel like if at that point in the season, you just want to put yourself in a position to get the best matchups. And if you're a number one seed, you likely are, and it still doesn't change the fact that they're a deep and quality team. So yeah, that's why the one thing that I push back on as far as why this is such a huge game, because yeah, in reality, it's not affecting either team's conference title hopes, or it's not one and done, or your season's over if you lose. So I think for Michigan, yeah, it's beneficial. Like, yeah, you were right there and you made a lot of mistakes and had some things to clean up, but like the best thing about that is you have time to make those mistakes and correct some things, and try and win a conference title now, and make a deep tournament run.
I was gonna make the same point. They haven't lost any ground in the Big Ten standings. So from that respect, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. But it was a big game against a really good team that you may see down the line. So in a way, it was a litmus test. I mean, we know this Michigan team is really good. They beat some good teams this year, and to play, neck and neck with Duke for most of the game, just I think, confirmed all of that.
Yeah, like Aaron says, 6 games in the NCAA tournament. You have to play well. I wouldn't say in all of them. Probably 5 you can do well, even 4 depending on who the second round matchup is. But after that, you have to play well, and one mistake and you're out. As far as the Big Ten, yes, this, like you guys said, this does not matter for that. Michigan returns to the Big Ten to Big Ten play tomorrow night. Tuesday night they host Minnesota. If they win that, then they're Big Ten champs. I mean, at least a share, because they are 3 games up and there's only 3 games left. If they win 2 of their last 4, and they're Minnesota at home, at Illinois, at Iowa, and then Michigan State at home. So none of those after Minnesota you would call easy, but all they win 2, and then they're outright champions. So that's their goal, and that's what they're shooting for. But I think that closes the book on the men's team. Like we said, we've got some games coming up that we'll be covering. They dropped to 3 in the latest poll, but still on track for a number 1 seed. The Michigan women's basketball team, they won at Michigan State. That was last Sunday. Ryan Zook, you were there. This Sunday, they went to Iowa and they just had no offense. They could not score, and they ended up losing. So it fell a little bit in the poll. They wrapped their regular season this week. They're a week earlier than the men, so they're at Ohio State on Wednesday and then Maryland on Saturday at home. Both very tough games, and both will decide like kind of the Big Ten seeding. They're in position to definitely get that double bye and play on Friday. Right now they're tied. UCLA already won the regular season. They're tied with Iowa, who they just lost to, as I mentioned, for second place.
Yeah, did you watch any of that game on Sunday, Andrew? I was obviously dealing with a lot of stuff in DC, so
Yeah.
I looked at the score. I'm like, 44 points for the highest scoring team in the conference. Like, what the heck happened?
It was almost half, barely, just a little more than half of their usual total. They couldn't get anything going offensively. Couldn't make any outside shots. Inside there just wasn't much. And on the defensive end, it was the same thing. They were just giving up a lot of open shots, a lot of layups. They hung tight for a little bit. I think they got it to 4, maybe even 3. Certainly 4, but like at the end of the third quarter, it looks like it was going to be 4 going into the fourth, and then Iowa banks in a 3 at the buzzer to push it to 7, and that was kind of it. So just a poor shooting night, which they've had a couple of those. In Big Ten play, their non-conference games have all been very competitive, but 2 of their Big Ten losses, just the offense didn't show up, and as a result, they lost. But they'll try to finish this regular season strong before the Big Ten tournament starts in Indianapolis next week. Yeah, so as we mentioned, the Michigan women fell a couple spots to number 8 in this week's poll, but they'll try to bounce back before the tournament starts. All right, that's our basketball recap. Let's move on to some football. Not playing games right now, but a lot of off-field news. Their coaching staff, at one point I was writing everything down, and then I was out for a couple weeks. Is their coaching staff finally set now? I see they hired a defensive tackles coach, but they've also had some comings and goings. Is it set, or will there be more hires in the future?
We think it's set. We thought it was set a few weeks ago, and then and then Lou Esposito decided to leave for the NFL. So that created an opening at defensive line, defensive tackles, whatever you want to call it. And Michigan, they were able to find someone. Larry Black, 36, the defensive line coach from Vanderbilt. The last 4 years, he's recently promoted to co-defensive coordinator. He's going to come in while he's defensive line coach the last couple of years. He's going to focus on the tackles at Michigan. As we know, Kyle Whittingham brought in his defensive ends coach from Utah, and Lewis Powell. He is now on staff and will do this and will coach the same position at Michigan. So Black will be concentrated on the tackles. He's a guy with Midwest roots, Cincinnati native. Played football in Indiana in the late 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s. And he's coached around the Midwest as well. He was at Toledo for a little bit. He was a GA at Notre Dame for a brief period. So he's got ties to the Midwest, and I think will probably help with recruiting in the same respects that Lou Esposito did. Right, that was I think one of the bigger reasons why Kyle Whittingham wanted to keep him. His ties to the state of Michigan, his ties to recruiting, his obviously knowledge of the university and the football program. He's lost some of that now with Esposito leaving, but Black also certainly has the accolades and the pedigree, just from a regional standpoint to help the staff.
I see they also hired a very important hire in today's college football climate, someone a position that wasn't around even just a few years ago, and that is the GM, the general manager position. Michigan hired Dave Poloquin, who was in the private sector as like an agent representative the past several months, but before that, had spent a long time at Notre Dame under various coaches. I looked at the salary for like the last Michigan GM, Sean McGee. It wasn't quite up there with what you would think would be the top programs what they're paying their GM.
Yeah, Michigan didn't spend a ton on the GM spot, and I was curious as to why, especially as the need for that position has kind of ramped up the last couple of years. He was integral in landing some of these big recruits. Bryce Underwood, for example. He very much kind of handles the NIL and the revenue share money and everything else. He's the kind of the money guy. So that's kind of what the GM role has evolved into nowadays. You mentioned Dave Poloquin. He was at Notre Dame for 2 decades. I mean, he was there a very long time. He was kind of in the GM role before it was a GM role. I think he was director of player personnel, managing the roster and everything else. And then he shifted into an AD, kind of an assistant AD role in the athletic department, but still worked with NIL. But more importantly, he's got experience managing a roster, helping with recruiting. You mentioned he worked for Athletes First, an agency an athlete agency. So he's got experience now on the agency side a little bit. So a well-rounded guy, experience at the college level. Is he going to be a huge mover and shaker? I don't know. Is he going to be on some list of the top, GMs in the college football? Probably not, at least to start. But between Michigan's resources and pedigree and everything else, I think it's an easy. It's an obvious spot for him. Makes sense. He's got again, we go back to regional ties. He's very familiar with this level of college football. In this day and age, you need someone to kind of manage everything between the portal and guys deciding whether they're going to leave or come back every year. You need somebody paying attention to that, because as we said last year, Sharon Moore talked about it a lot. He leaned on these guys because he can't manage everything. It's impossible nowadays with roster construction every year, landing guys, losing guys. It's a big job, and certainly every football program nowadays has someone dedicated, and that'll be Poloquin here.
Yeah, I think this will be fascinating to see how this hire turns out. And I mean, it's too early to make any judgments. But to go back to McGee, I mean, I know Michigan has had a couple down years here, but like given all the turnover and all like the chaos basically that has happened inside the program for Michigan under with him leading the way, for them to keep their roster largely intact and to keep their recruits intact and still recruiting at a high level over the past couple cycles. I think a lot had to do with McGee. So it's going to be a difficult role for him to step in and see if he can kind of keep the wheels turning here for Kyle Whittingham and company as well.
The timing here was interesting, right? Because A new coach is always, hired, comes in, usually, brooms out the staff as Kyle Whittingham largely did with the assistant coaches. Took him a little bit of time to get to the GM and some of the recruiting spots. McGee wasn't the only one that was shown the door last week. Michigan's recruiting director Sam Popper was set packing. Michigan's director of player personnel Albert Karshnia was set packing. Popper since landed a job at San Diego State, but these are guys that were integral in identifying high school players, bringing them in on visits, helping in the decision-making process and everything else. So not only has Kyle Whittingham kind of overhauled the coaching staff, he's overhauling the recruiting staff as well. And it started at the top with the GM and it's kind of trickled down to some of the other key personnel spots as well.
Poloquin, as we said, was at Notre Dame for a long time, but I've been told that he yeah, the parting of ways wasn't necessarily the happiest, and he's all on board with Michigan, as is his family. So yeah, big supporters of the program now. So they're off and running. It's like I said, like we said, it's a very important job. It was not it was non-existent not too long ago, but now player retention and the contracts and all this stuff is very important, especially as you're having a coaching transition. Ryan, we're talking about a little bit about recruiting here. I see there's been some moves in the last, since we last talked.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan lost a commitment from four-star quarterback Peter Bork, had been committed since last August, I think, and not Bryce Underwood caliber recruit, but I mean a top 100 uh, prospect overall in the 2027 class, top 10 quarterback. I mean, he had just a sensational junior year, won Gatorade Player of the Year in Massachusetts, and it seemed like, I mean, he initially after the Kyle Whittingham hire, I mean, he was saying all the right things about, yeah, no, I'm still locked in with Michigan and having fun getting to know the staff. But again, there was no prior relationship there with really any with either Whittingham or any of the assistants. So it's like he's generating a ton of other interest. So it's like, all right, well, I don't want to, start looking around while I'm committed. So he hasn't ruled out Michigan as a possibility, but again, he's going to start taking some other visits like Virginia Tech, Penn State are heavily in the mix, Washington. So there's a lot of other notable programs that would love to add him. So it's going to be interesting to see what Michigan does now. In the meantime, I mean, they've already kind of turned the page a little bit and offered a couple more quarterbacks. They told him that they weren't going to offer any other quarterbacks as long as he was committed. And shortly after he decommitted, Michigan already kind of pivoted and offered a couple more quarterbacks. One of them, Dane Weber, out of California, a low 4-star, 6'2", more of a pocket passer. And then the notable one, I think, is Salt Lake City, Utah, Camden Lapati, number 129 overall prospect, number 10 quarterback, has already had previous relationships with a lot of the Utah staff just because, they were in the Utes' backyard, essentially. He's been committed to Illinois since July, but he's kind of surged on the recruiting trail here over the past few months, and Michigan's kind of entering the fray now, or entering the mix, and going to try and get both of these quarterbacks on campus here this spring and next year, and try and I mean you want to make a splash your first cycle if you're Kyle Whittingham and Jason Beck, and that's you do it by landing an elite level quarterback, and I think either getting Bork back on board or getting Lapati would fall under that category.
Similar pattern, right? When you see coaches leave or new coaches brought in, high school recruits reconsider their options, and you see the staff, in this case, Whittingham and his assistants, reach into the regional area they're most familiar with, right? In terms of Utah and the state of California. So I can't say I'm surprised. I am surprised Bork hung on as long as he did. As you said, he was saying the right things. He said he's still committed and everything else. It took him a little time, but he is decommitted. I'd be surprised if he were to come back. Never say never. Michigan does mean something. The money is good, and obviously, you want to play in the Big Ten and everything else. So We'll see where things go. We've talked about this a lot since Kyle Whittingham was introduced. They're going to go in their backyard, the areas they're more comfortable with when it comes to recruiting, and so far they've certainly lived up to that billing, especially out west in the Mountain West area. They're going to kids and schools they're most familiar and comfortable with, and that's certainly the case here.
Yeah, no, and overall now, I mean, Michigan has a lot of they're kind of behind the 8 ball in the 2027 class. I mean, still a lot of time until signing day next December, but now only 3 commits left, no real blue chippers. I Ricardo Kitchen out of Muskegon, a 4-star edge, but then just a pair of 3-star offensive linemen as well. So a lot of holes to fill. It will be interesting to see how this class, Kyle Whittingham's first class, maybe differs than traditional Michigan classes in the past, given the different backgrounds basically for all of Michigan's new staff.
Yeah, you guys talked about the timing. As far as like this isn't the busiest time like for Polk when he gets his job. I don't think he's going to exactly hit the ground running. There's not a ton going on right now, is there? Until the spring happens, and then you kind of figure out where your roster stands.
Yeah, it kind of goes back. Kyle Whittingham made the decision to move on from Sean McGee after transfer portal closed, after guys are already on campus. The roster is pretty much set for 2026. They can't do a whole lot of adding or subtracting. There will be some graduate kids who enter the portal will be able to go elsewhere, but movement is pretty much quieted, and there won't be much else for the rest of the year. So Michigan pretty much knows its roster, and that's why, and originally I said the timing was interesting because they got through the last recruiting class, they got through the transfer portal cycle. They were able to find their coaching staff, and now they decide to move on from some of the key players in recruiting. So it is going to give, a bunch of these guys, with the new GM and some of the new recruiting folks they bring in, a good chunk of time to get their feet wet and get comfortable and everything else. But we've talked about this in past, right? Like when new coaches are brought on, new coordinators are brought on. Typically, that first recruiting class isn't what you're accustomed to, and it may not be accustomed to what that staff is used to doing either. Just because there's so many different moving parts. You got kids that are leery about what to do and when to do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see this next Michigan recruiting class high on the board by the end of it.
All right. Well, we'll have plenty of coverage on mlive.com/Wolverines, the coaches, the roster, everything with football. Let's talk a little hockey before we wrap up here. The Big Ten season is coming to a close. We're about to start the Big Ten tournament, I think, here in a couple of weeks. So, who does Michigan play in these final games, and where does the Big Ten stand right now?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan has the final bye of the season for the Big Ten because there's 7 teams. So one Big Ten team is off every weekend. It just so happens that Michigan's off the final weekend. So their regular season wraps up this weekend at home against Minnesota, who's had a down year, but still a really talented team. Michigan is hanging on to a 1-point lead in the Big Ten right now, but they have also played 2 more games in Michigan State, which has 4 more games remaining. So it's looking very unlikely now that the Wolverines will win their first Big Ten regular season title. But a 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament isn't the worst thing. But I mean, for how good of a season they've had so far, they would be, I'm sure they would want to kind of earn a little bit of hardware. But it just happens that Michigan State is the only other team that's been better this season, and I mean, they play, I think Ohio State and Minnesota left to close their regular season. So 2 of the bottom teams in the Big Ten. So I would assume MSU would get at least 7 points out of those games to win the Big Ten. But you never know. I mean, bottom line, Michigan needs to take care of their own business. And for them, this weekend too is important as you want to kind of wrap up a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And I think they could definitely do that with a couple wins, even just 1 win. So it'll be interesting to see how this weekend shakes out.
And then they play Simon Fraser. What is that? Is a college? I never seen that before.
Yeah, Canadian. Yeah, yeah, it's a Canadian college. They play exhibition against some Canadian colleges every year, typically before
Yeah.
the season.
Okay.
But they added Simon Fraser late because they knew they were going to be on bye and they want to play something, and during that bye week. So yeah, they're playing a Canadian college.
Well, there we go. All right. Michigan basketball, football, hockey, all sorts of coverage here on the Wolverine Confidential podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading our work at mlive.com/Wolverines.